Hey guys, Angela here, and welcome back to Hobby Night. This week, instead of doing a painting or unboxing video, as it is shelter in place, I'm going to be doing a gap filling video where I show you how I use Magic-Sculpt, which is a product that a couple people have asked me about both in my vlog videos that I've been doing and also on Instagram. So I figured this was a perfect opportunity to talk about it. So we'll meet you back here in a minute and we'll get started. All right, and we are back at the table, and I have three things that I basically want to show you guys today. The first of which is going to be, we're going to fill this line here on the back of my old Chaos Warrior Knight, actually, I think. So I did a terrible job gluing this together, so we're going to gap fill that. I'm also going to gap...
How many years ago did you glue that together?
9, possibly 10, but a very long time ago. It was a very, very long time ago. But the other thing that we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and gap fill here as well on his mane, and we're going to do a little bit of texture work to sort of try to blend the feathers together, because that's something that you can use this putty for. And then the other thing we'll do is we're going to use it to fill in these spaces here. So yeah, what I am going to be using today is a 2-part resin material from Magic-Sculpt. It comes in a hardener and a resin. They are slightly different colors, so I believe this one is the resin. I have at some point swapped their lids, but I think I have it correct because I bought some new ones, and without fully opening them, I think I have them correct. And then the hardener, yes, we'll talk about safety in a second. So this is the hardener. Now, when you are using this stuff, if you have sensitive skin, you may want to use gloves. You definitely do not want to swallow this product. You don't want to get it in your eyes. I actually rubbed a little bit of it on my face the other day, and while I was working on Baphomet here, so this big guy, I was doing some of the work here on the tail, which is some stuff that you can do with him, or with this putty. This one is all hardened now. But yeah, I accidentally rubbed my face and I had a little bit of swelling. So just be careful. Don't rub it on your face. Make sure you wash your hands thoroughly, before you do anything else after you've done using it. Do not eat while you're using it, because again, you don't want to swallow any of this. And it's the same thing for green stuff. So this is green stuff if any of y'all aren't familiar with it. It's also a 2-part putty. You just mix these two together and they will turn green, hence its name, and it'll harden in the same way that this stuff does over like a 24-hour period. It is hardened before that period, but it's best if you let it, harden for a full day if you want it to be fully sealed and everything, or cured. But yeah, so you can use this stuff too. I find this to be way more sticky than this stuff is. I've heard that you can use Vaseline when working with this to help prevent it from sticking to your hands and being as just, difficult to use, but I've not tried that. I prefer using this stuff because it comes out of the container a little bit less sticky, especially since these are a little bit older tins. So I've had these open for a while. The product won't dry out. Like, despite the fact that this looks like it's hard, it's not. You just scoop it out and mix it in, and then once they're mixed together, then it will harden, and once it's hard, you can't do anything else with it, but this is still totally usable. So I just find these easier to work with. But basically, you take 2 parts of this stuff. So equal parts, half and half. I believe the same thing is true for green stuff from when I've used that. And then you mix it together until it's fully mixed. And then we're gonna start using it to fill our gaps. Hopefully this will be enough. If I need to mix a little bit more, we will. But that is the plan here. Yeah, that looks good. So it's just, it looks just like putty. If you've ever used like craft putty or anything, it kind of looks similar. It's just a little bit less safe for you. So we're gonna go ahead and start with the base, I think, because this is going to be the easiest and we'll use the biggest chunk. So really, all you would want to do here for this base, if you were wanting to fill this in so it felt a little more solid, is you can get these shaper tools. They're silicone shaper tools. Mine are a little old and I've let some resin dry on it. You probably want to clean them a little bit better than that. But you can just use these to essentially push everything in and fill that space so that when you're painting it or doing any texture work later, say putting your tufts in or using some sort of texture paint to do groundwork, you have something to work with a little bit more. And you can do full textures with this. Like you could shape this to be more like a rock if you wanted. I'm not super concerned about that. I want it to just kind of look like roughed up earth, kind of like what my cork is already doing. That's why I left it sort of rough here. But yeah, you can see it's already filling in. I've got a nice texture going on there that's not super specific, but it'll work. And once it's painted and everything, it'll be really good. I'm not gonna do, like you can see here, I left a little bit of a gap and then there's this little gap here. You don't have to fill everything. Those can be worked to your advantage for this gravel or texture, whatever you're doing with your ground. So you don't have to make sure things are super clean. Now, when we get to like, say the horse's back, or maybe the gap filling on the, I don't know what that is, a griffin, I guess? A wingless griffin? A griffhound. Then you may want to fill it in more specifically because it may look a little weird to have a gap there, but in dirt or rock or more just organic things that could have crevices, you can leave spaces. It's not a huge deal. All right, so I got a little bit of this putty on my nail. Ladies, if you also have acrylic nails, or guys, if you just have longer fingernails, you definitely don't want to let this stuff harden on it. It can ruin them, and that goes for your real nails as well. Like if you got it underneath your fingernails and you let it harden, I'm sure you could get it off, but it may be uncomfortable and a bit awkward. So if you notice that kind of stuff, just make sure you're washing your hands after using this. Like I said, it's very important for safety. But we're working on the other side now, as you can see, and we're just gonna, honestly, probably not do too much more with this filling. I don't want it to be fully filled. I just want it to, one, this is gonna help seal it to the base. So this thing is not gonna be coming off, which is why I want it to be touching both the miniature portion as well as the cork in both layers of the cork. So that it just keeps everything together. You have less of a risk of, you know, the PVA glue that was used originally to glue it down from coming loose and just having the whole thing fly off. All right, so we're basically done with what I think I want to do with this. Like I said, I didn't need it to be super filled in. I didn't need it to be super clean. I just wanted to use it to seal stuff down and not have quite so much that needed to be filled with texture paint. And I feel like we've pretty much gotten to that point. Just gonna fill that in a little bit there to blend it. Perfect. Yep, so that's how I'm gonna leave it. And from there, you would just finish your base like normal, paint it up, put your texture paints on there, do any tufts if you wanted to. And then obviously, you know, stick the mini that actually goes on the base with it and get him painted. And that'll be done. So next we're gonna go ahead and take a look at the horse. So you may not need a whole lot when you're doing actual just basic gap filling. And the other thing that I recommend is using a little bit of water with whatever tool that you're using to fill the space to smooth the putty down, because you don't want sort of lumpy stuff like what we were doing with our base. This you may want to actually be smoother because you may need to possibly attach an additional miniature. In this case, there is actually a rider that goes on his back, so we wouldn't want there to be too much of a buildup here so that he doesn't sit properly. But you may have other pieces that need to be attached, or you just might want it to be very smooth because that just fits with whatever the miniature is. So, you know, use your discretion when you're doing that. But yeah, we're gonna go ahead and fill this now. We're gonna just take a tiny amount of this putty and basically just smooth it into the space. And then just spread it around until there's no more gap, or at least it's very less noticeable. And then you're done. And you just let it harden. And you don't touch it for a little while. All right, and so as you can see, the gap is filled. That will dry fine. It's gonna be totally smooth enough for anything to sit on that without being hindered. And that's really all it takes. And you can use, like that gap wasn't super huge, so you probably didn't need to necessarily do this, but when you have larger gaps on a model, you can definitely use this to fill it in. Or if you just really like having very smooth lines and not having contrast paint, for example, will go into the gaps a lot. So sometimes even filling these small ones is worthwhile, because then you don't have this weird seam because your paint has recessed into it and you get this really dark line. Now, if you're painting a very dark miniature where you're using, I don't know, Basilicum gray or like Black Templar or something like that, where it's a dark color anyways, the pooling and filling it in that way probably is fine. But occasionally you can have a gap that ends up going through your entire miniature, and then you have this weird bleed that happens. I've definitely had that happen when painting some stuff before. So this is the reason that you gap fill. And then last but not least, we're going to take a little bit more of this putty and fill in the gap here on the Griffin, or the Griffhound. And we're just gonna poke at it with our little sharp tool here until we kind of get a similar-ish texture to what they've done for the feathers. Just to mimic it so it blends a little bit better. And you could build up these feathers, like you could make him poofier if you wanted. A lot of people will use this stuff for kit bashing or doing sculpting to make something look different than what it did originally. And that's one of the reasons I play around with it so much. It's the main reason I actually picked it up originally, was because I just really wanted to try my hand at doing some sculpting stuff, because while in college, because I went to art school, I was never really good at the 3D stuff. I feel a lot more confident with it now, and working on modding existing miniatures, like not doing them from scratch, but modding an existing miniature I found to be a lot of fun. So you can find some of that stuff that I do on my Instagram, hobby_night, rather. And we'll put a link to that in the description. Let me know in the comments, as we're wrapping this up here, if you guys like to use a particular brand of putty. I know that, there's Magic-Sculpt, there's green stuff, there's also, I think, brown stuff. 24 hours. We talked about that a little bit. It's about a 24-hour full cure. You can start painting with it realistically after a couple of hours, because it does harden decently fast. I've never actually timed it, so don't quote me on any of those numbers. But I feel like after even an hour, if you have not messed with it and you just let it be and let it set, you should be able to start doing additional work, or say taking a tool and carving back out portions and still have it be malleable enough for that to not be a total pain in the butt. But it does harden pretty quickly, but for it to fully cure, it does take 24 hours. But as you can see, like, I've just gone in, I've sort of overlapped the collar a little bit. We can clean up and pull stuff away if we want to, but I've just done a little bit of, speckling here. And I've already kind of got a little bit of that texture going. So it's really not super difficult to mimic some of these textures. It's really just a matter of playing around with things and seeing how to use the tools to get them to do kind of what you want until you find that it's working the way that you want it to. But hopefully you guys have enjoyed this tutorial. I'm going to finish this guy up, and I will post possibly these up on Instagram later just to show off what the final result went for the video. So we'll see you then.